My immortal soul is composed of exactly 3 elements: David Bowie, video games, and Shakespeare. Legend has it that if all 3 of these elements were ever combined into one piece of media, I would ascend to godhood. On the 3-way Venn diagram of my existence, I'm now one step closer to that goal with the release of Elsinore, developed by Golden Glitch. Elsinore is a top-down, talky, clicky, thinky adventure game adapted from Shakespeare's Hamlet, one of my all-time favorite things. You play as Ophelia, noble lady of Denmark, living in Elsinore Castle, trapped in a 4-day time loop as you attempt to avert the play's tragic ending. It's essentially Hamlet meets Majora's Mask, with each loop resetting the world, but not the tools Ophelia has in her arsenal. Difference being, Ophelia's arsenal is information rather than weapons, because in proper Shakespearean fashion, information and manipulation are how you get things done. Wantonly throwing around juicy gossip is pointless, so you need to choose who to tell what, when, and where. Your core gameplay loop is waking up in the morning, running around to talk to different NPCs and share information, and observing events around the castle in order to learn where different people will be at different times and under different conditions. Eventually you'll end up dead somehow and the cycle repeats. Knowing this, the game is appropriately named, as the Castle of Elsinore is a beautifully intricate clockwork of moving parts, which the player can throw a wrench into at any time. Witness Claudius confess his crimes in the chapel on Loop 1, Day 2, then tell Hamlet first thing in the morning on Loop 2, Day 1. Now Hamlet's elaborate daily schemes are thrown off completely as he rushes to kill Claudius as quickly as possible, opening up new opportunities for spying and personal gain. Things start off simply enough, Ophelia really only being able to share what little info she has just to see what happens. But a few hours in, she's got enough knowledge to get half the castle killed if she so chooses. And the schemes you have to pull to advance become layered and winding. First loop Ophelia may be murdered right on time for her death in the play, but future Ophelias are harder to catch unaware, and the story makes some unbelievable turns as you exploit it. It's a wonderful system, evocative not only of the mentioned Majora's Mask, but also 2017's Sexy Brutale, another top-down, time-looping puzzler. Toward the late game, I delayed reaching the credits for quite a while as I tinkered with all the bits and pieces just to see what could happen. And some of these storylines are so convoluted to obtain that I'm sure the developers knew I would do that. Not every piece on the board is as important as I'd like, Horatio in particular only being involved in 1 or 2 major events, but the system is impressive regardless, and every character acts exactly as they should in any given situation. That is, aside from a few small inconsistencies that come from the sheer volume of options here. One in particular being that I didn't get to see a major plot scene because Claudius wanted to fuck. The game lacks voice acting for the most part, outside of a scant few line reads during important events and stock words and sounds characters make in reaction to things. This allows for each character to be acted and understood in the player's mind, same as when reading a Shakespeare play, and that flexibility grants depth to each line. The small amount of fully voiced dialogue in the game isn't as excellently performed as I'd like, Ophelia's few monologues being unfortunately weak and not as well written as the rest of the game, but that's a small quibble when considering the game's even smaller budget. The characters are portrayed well, each one being just as likable, hateable, sympathetic, and vile as they should be. Hamlet himself is a highlight, his gloominess and obsessions being played equally for laughs and for horror. Claudius is thoroughly disgusting throughout, but his chapel confession is no less moving than ever, and being able to follow him through his daily schedule is humanizing. Ophelia is famous as an observer after all, and her stalking and eavesdropping serve no unimportant purpose here, both in gameplay and in understanding each character. Certain characters who never received much attention in the play are given new life here, namely Bernardo. Bernardo, a character who disappears after Act 1, Scene 1 of the play, gets loads of screen time here, and I love him to death. Even the wholly new characters like Lady Britt and Irma have their depth and a number of possible fates. The Castle of Elsinore itself looks beautiful, the art style invoking a papery, parchmenty aesthetic, making the whole game look like a moving painting. The shadows even move in real time, making fast-forwarding to get to certain events feel weighty. As each day proceeds and more characters inevitably die, the color palette grays out and the music goes from chipper acoustics to dread and silence, once again showing the Majora's Mask influence. The entire game's soundtrack is fantastic, with Ophelia's theme, the courtyard track, and King Hamlet's theme being standouts. The title screen track is barren and ominous, and the supernatural tracks have a warping, glitchy vibe that invokes time and displacement. Kicking off the game with this music while watching Ophelia foreshadowingly read next to the same water she'll soon die in is an excellent opening, slight Z-fighting on the cut of her book aside. Books and stories play a large part in the game's themes, with agency and dissociation sitting at the forefront. Ophelia herself is a character who famously lacks agency, forced to follow the orders of her father and brother, and her acquiring agency through the player is not ignored. The moment she gains control over her life is the moment she becomes trapped in time, forced to find her own way out of the narrative that's been written for her already. Ophelia, like the player, must intimately learn the nature of each character, while also remaining distant enough to let them die or even cause their deaths. Ophelia becomes more and more fed up with those around her as the days reset over and over, special note being made of Hamlet accosting her in her room, stockings fouled at the start of each loop. By the end, she's telling him to leave before he's even had a chance to speak. And while it may look silly at first to see Ophelia standing stock still in the middle of the courtyard for hours on end while she waits for events to happen, it actually feels natural. Her goals becoming clearer and the days becoming duller. Like King Hamlet says, it's rather boring being stuck in time. I could map out the entire game's layout from memory after only a single playthrough, a surefire sign that the game did a great job with its looping empowerment. Going from a hapless bystander to a ruthlessly efficient scheming machine running about the castle and causing deaths is satisfying, even unsettlingly so. But, like with any tragedy or with real life, no amount of cleverness can avoid an imperfect ending. My impression of the game as I played it led me to believe that I was turning a tragedy into a comedy. After all, Shakespeare's tragedies are named after people, while his comedies are named after places and events. It's called Elsinore, it's gotta end happily, right? Well, the nature of fiction is, unfortunately or not, a closed circle. When you read a book, you reach its end, and the only option you have is to start back at the beginning. The work is what it is and can't be changed. Hamlet, his family, and his country die at the end of the play. That's a fact. And no matter how many changes you make while adapting it, at the heart of Hamlet is tragedy. The two are inseparable. Write a version where everything ends up happy? You'll spend the rest of your life knowing that the original remains performed and taught endlessly. People will dull to the tragedy and accept it, even study it over and over, and the only choice you have is to close the book and move on to something else. Much like Hamlet itself, Elsinore reflects on the nature of choice and the morality of action. That is what Elsinore is about, and discovering it is a wild ride. Spoilers from here on out, because discussing the themes of this game in depth and how it relates to its adapted work requires it. If you're interested in playing the game yourself, or even just watching a playthrough, please stop now and do so. Timestamp on screen for when spoilers end. Toward the end of the game, it's revealed that Quince, a playwright stuck in the same loop as you, is the one behind your imprisonment. He wants you to find a book which will allow him to escape and continue tormenting people for the rest of time for his own amusement. That same book allows you to permanently choose any of the game's endings you've found, returning the book to Quince in the process. Try as you might to find a way out without using the book, it can't be done. King Hamlet himself tells you as much, that there is no perfect ending, and that you should take what you can get. However, after this, you get a second option. Quince empowers you to kill every single person in the castle. Ophelia is initially horrified, but eventually becomes content with the slaughter. This comes down to a puzzle in which you need to figure out how to kill off every member of the court without being killed yourself, a process which will undoubtedly take a few loops. The process becomes routine, and once the job is done, Ophelia joins Quince to explore the endless worlds at his disposal. She muses on the nature of reality before the credits play and the game closes on its own, deleting your save data in the process. What initially comes off as an unusually grimdark ending settles into place as the only logical outcome. Ophelia is stuck in a tragedy, that much is unavoidable. To try to make anything else of it is naive, a denial of the fiction. Even with the power of choice, she still lacks agency, same as before. The story won't let her leave with tools so mundane as gossip and politics. Those things have nothing to do with the larger concepts of fiction and reality. The Playmaster is above it all, and the Playmaster doesn't see her or anyone else in the story as real, given that he's created their reality. Her first option is to accept her role as fiction, that she'll reach sorrow at some point and inevitably die one way or another. Returning the book to Quince continues the world the way it always was. Her second option is the only one which gives her a real choice. The fact that she's lived outside of time shows well enough the artifice of her situation, that the literal functions of the universe she's in don't allow for agency. Her life, regardless of how she lives it, is out of her hands. So while the kill everyone ending is grimdark for sure, it's also the more uplifting one. Ophelia abandoning her ties to the awful world she's lived in her whole life and choosing a higher form of existence gives her an actual way out of a rigged universe. Only hesitance at the place you'll end up, or worry over the suffering you'll cause, could stop you. There's good reason the game closes on its own and deletes your save after the credits, because plunging the same Ophelia back into the same universe for whatever reason would violate her newfound agency. The game isn't real, you aren't causing real suffering to real people by killing them, and that artifice is communicated throughout the entire game. By the time you're purposely getting characters killed to serve your ends, you've already accepted the artifice and are engaging in the same cruelty as Quince. The same cruelty as any artist, really. I initially found Elsinore while searching to see if any Shakespeare games really existed. There's shockingly few given Shakespeare's legacy. There's the odd Shakespeare reference here and there, some flash games and mobile games, but Elsinore remains the only one I'm aware of with its level of scope. It's a special game, one I've been really excited to share with you all. It's one of those games I'd love to play for the first time again, and that's one of the highest praises I can imagine for any piece of media. Now I just need a good David Bowie Shakespeare video game and I'm free from this mortal coil. Thank you all for watching. I hope you understand what a big nerd I am now. I studied a lot of Shakespeare in college and it makes me really happy to get to use it on this channel. Make me a King Lear or Antony and Cleopatra video game and I'll reimburse you the development cost myself. Golden Glitch, hit me up, I want a Macbeth time travel loop next.